And um, have you gotten it? And you've looked at Screen 360 TV over the years. How was it? How was it coming on today?
It was fine. I just, like I said, I was a little bit distracted. So I got on the site. It's like, okay, what? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Were you gardening?
anyway, no, I was having lunch with the kids and Brewster.
Oh,
We were having
oh,
our
oh.
family lunch, which starts at 12:30. So I knew it was going to be a little tight, and I thought I had set my alarm for 1, and it turns out I set it for 1 a.m. So I had to remember to turn it back off when it's like, oh my God, it's after 1. I have to get inside.
That's funny. I have done that. And now where time is our architecture now, right?
I
And
like that. Yeah.
it's really something. We're enjoying that. Well, today we're talking about homeschooling, and I want to really dig into your experience
Mhm.
being a homeschool parent. And were you
Mhm.
also a teacher? Sometime what part of that did you take on?
Actually, none of it. I'm not a teacher. I mean, I guess I should probably give you kind of the timeline trajectory. So when we went to Amsterdam when the kids were young, Logan was in kindergarten, Kazan was in third grade. Uh, we took them out for a semester.
Uh-huh.
And so that was my first foray into homeschooling. It wasn't the complete semester. We had started the semester in San Francisco, but we left early and we made special arrangements with the school um, for the kids to continue to receive credit. And basically, Brewster and I both taught the kids during that summer and spring semester from our own experience and what we loved. So Brewster was teaching them about computer science and math, and I was teaching them about poetry and chemistry and writing, and so it was uh, maybe not as complete an education as you might um, expect in the school system, but at kindergarten and third grade, it really,
Yeah.
education is much broader than, the subjects that we move on to as we get older. And it was really interesting. The kids were engaged, we were engaged because we were teaching from our heart. I mean,
Mhm.
and I read a bunch of books at the time about curriculum and what was needed. And I actually started with those books. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about American history right now or something. And it was boring. It was really boring. And, I consider myself a smart and engaged person. It's like, I can take this material and make it fun. And it was just too hard. I mean, yeah, I was also working and so I didn't have the kind of the emotional energy to really learn a new subject or
Mhm.
review a subject and then teach it to someone else. And so we came up with this scheme of actually just teaching what we knew. And it was so successful. The kids wrote volumes of poetry. We did chemistry experiments. They were doing little programs with Brewster and, mathematical situation uh, games and whatnot. It was such a powerful experience. And with Logan, he went back the next year to first grade, and there wasn't really anything remarkable about that. But when Caslin went back to fourth grade, he just he was much more poised and seemed to have not only gotten a worldliness, which I think children do get from
Yeah.
traveling, which is one of the reasons I've always taken my kids on such long trips over the summer, but also I just felt that, especially, and I can only speak to the writing aspect in this particular case because we did do these chemistry experiments, but I wasn't involved in Brewster's part of the education. But his writing was much deeper, much more rich than the other stories. In fact, I did a book of stories in 4th grade. Do you want me to go get it? I can probably.
Yeah, and I've seen the poetry, your family poetry
Oh
volume with the
yeah.
boys' poems in there.
Oh shoot! I think it must be downstairs. I don't want to really waste more time trying to.
That's all right. We'll see it. I can see it another time.
It's a book. The project was the kids were to take kind of a creation story or something that they'd heard, how kind of a la Kipling, how the leopard got its spots sort of thing. And they were supposed to create a story around that. And so I think there were 18 kids in the class. So since I was designing this book, I was privy to all of their writing. And okay, sure, I'm sure there's a certain amount of parental pride. It's like, oh, my kid is writing so well. But I just felt there was a level of sophistication and, again, not only parental pride, but there's also the aspect of of uh, um, kids being, what did I want to say? Oh, I've lost my train of thought. But
Kids being genuine and
well, no, I guess just there was just a level of sophistication. I think that some kids have a gift in different subjects. That's just kind of normal. And you try to work to their strengths and you try to help build up areas where they're maybe less strong. And it is true that Kazlan is a writer. I mean, he just definitely loves to write. He was a voracious reader. So maybe some of this came from that. But I just felt that his writing in this particular collection of writings was much more sophisticated. And I think it's because he had 4 or 5 months of somebody who was passionate about writing sitting down and writing with him and helping him and speaking from my own passion and giving hopefully a glimmer of that to him. So that was kind of where we started in terms of homeschooling. And then, and that was both kids. And then,
let me stop you for a minute,
yeah.
Mary, and introduce you to Dee Dee Pierce. And then I have a couple of questions from that segment.
Okay.
Dee Dee Pierce, I love to say, is our Teacher of the Year from
Yay!
Mountain View Los Altos High Schools in Santa Clara County.
Yeah.
And
Hello.
this
Sorry, it's like we have this weather where like we lose power with these thunderstorms, and it's like you go, okay, so that's what happened. It's like thunderstorms are coming through here, and our power like comes and goes. So I'm sorry.
MaryAustin is from Ohio, and Dee Dee is in Ohio.
Oh, you're kidding! Oh my God.
Yes.
Where are you?
Remember those thunderstorms? They're dramatic, or they can be.
Exactly. Where are you in Ohio?
I grew up in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
And then my oldest son actually went to Oberlin, so he had his time in Ohio.
Well, good. Are you in Ohio right now?
No, I'm in San Francisco. So.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I'm just wishing it was warm.
Yeah.
Not really warm enough to warrant not having
it's
jacket on.
Oh no, we have a heat wave going through. It's miserable. It's absolutely miserable.
Oh dear. Well,
Yeah.
feel Mary's fog a little bit.
Okay.
Mary has just told us about, well, you can see that. I'm going to ask questions about
Okay.
taking the children, her 2 boys, traveling, taking them out of school, and when they were kindergarten and going into 3rd grade.
No, it was in the middle of the year. It was after Christmas. So I think we left in January I think we left in late February.
So you made
Yeah.
arrangements to that the kids would get the credit.
Right.
Did and you said that you would arrive at the curriculum. What was the agreement? Did they ask you to follow a curriculum or to have some points of, or how did they?
No, it was rather informal. And again, in kindergarten and third grade, you can afford to be a little more informal.
Yeah.
Um, there were, subjects that they recommended that they said that the third grade would be continuing with, and we basically I got a book on California curriculum for third grade, and kind of that's when I got frustrated and said, I don't want to teach this. I'm not going to be able to teach this well, and I'm not going to be able to be engaged myself. And if I can't be engaged myself, I'm not a professional teacher. I'm not going to be able to, engage the children in this. So I figured that it was a better plan to actually go and teach from my heart
Yeah.
what I wanted to teach. And I'm an educated person. I got plenty of material to draw upon from my own background, and it worked. We were really lucky.
Was there a deliberate amount of time and part of the day that you dedicated?
Well, that's one of the things that I think most people that venture out on this homeschooling adventure discover, is that you can cover the curriculum in far fewer hours than you can in school, and it makes sense because you're not shuffling kids from point A to point B. You don't
Right.
have PE and things that are accommodated in a schedule if you're homeschooling in other ways. You go for a walk to the market and tell the kids to run back to the house afterwards. You get your PE time in things like that. So we would start early in the morning because it seemed that was when the kids were most engaged, and in Holland it was a little bit cooler too, and so everybody's kind of attentive, and we were done certainly by noon, usually by 11. And so we would go and then spend the rest of the day at like the Rijksmuseum and go and look at the we were living very close to the Rijksmuseum, and I had a museum card, and we would go. We actually got to know the guards at the Rijksmuseum, and we would go and hang out at the night watch and talk to the man that was the guard there. He was actually the guard. One of the guards that we met was actually working for the Rijksmuseum when they had the terrible, the acid thrown on the painting, so it was really interesting because these guards spend a lot of time with this art, and they spend a lot of time interacting with people, and a lot of time observing people, observing the art. And so they were just treasure troves of information. And we spent a lot of time researching the characters that are in the painting, and that what was going on that time in Holland, and we used that actually as a way to branch out into other parts of the Rijksmuseum to kind of discover a Holland that's long gone, but that was certainly interesting and rich and beautiful and peculiar in its own right. So.
Oh, how nice that you so your own curiosity, of course, infected the boys. Yeah.
Well, I think they're pretty curious themselves, but it was nice to have kind of partners in crime. It was we developed a technique because since we were in Europe, we were going to a lot of museums, and we would go to the gift shop first before we even got into the museum, and we go through the wall that had all of the postcards, and the kids could pick anything they wanted. I think they had to pick like 10 pieces each. So, and then we go and we buy the postcards, and then we go into the museum. And it really was literally a treasure hunt. It's like, okay, you have to find your paintings. And sometimes they were really hard. They'd have this wonderful little object, and it's like, okay, where is that? And then you know, show it to the guards, like, where is this? Oh, I don't know, where there.
That's
but then,
great. Yeah.
but then it made you kind of spend the time to really look at things and try to figure out. It's like, okay, well, let's see. This says that it is 15th century French. Okay, well, let's look at the plan of the museum. Where would I find 15th century French art? And so it gave them a lot of other skills, like, you know, how to analyze architecture and organization of collections, how to, you know, and then you're spending time looking at the architecture too. And it's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I wonder why they put, you know, this collection next to this collection. Is there a reason? Well, what would that reason be? And, you know, so it was just really, it made the whole experience so rich. Although, as I said, I was working, so in the afternoons we probably went to the museums together, you know, a couple of times a week. They had a Filipina babysitter who was teaching them Tagalog, and they were out wandering around the museums and around the city too. So it was just a really precious time. But like I said, that was kind of, I think that experience is what gave me the courage to venture out on the next adventure, which happened when Logan completed 4th grade, and he was in a private school that had small classroom size, and with his older brother, that worked out great. In fact, still some of my closest friends in San Francisco are the parents of Kaslan's classmates from that school. He went, you know, K through 8, but they are small classrooms, and Logan's class was particularly small. I think it was 12 or 14 kids. And it was just, you know, this is the issue with a lot of small classrooms is that it was just not a good mix. It was the boys that were in there were really different, and there was a lot of, I don't know if I'd say bullying necessarily, but there was just a lot of conflict. And I just didn't feel that Logan was being particularly well served by this particular classroom. And it pained me because I loved the school. I was on the board. I mean, it was like, it wasn't as if it was like kind of, oh, well, we'll just switch schools. It's like, I was really vested in this school.
Was this Cathedral?
No, this was Presidio Hill School.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then we went from Presidio Hill School, and I thought, okay, well, 5th grade, there's town school for boys up the hill. There was Cathedral School for boys downtown. There were a couple of other schools that we looked at, and I ended up on Cathedral, and I don't remember why, other than I thought that it seemed much more academic than Presidio Hill School, and I thought, that's really, you know, this is a really smart kid. He was already at that time very interested in birds. In fact, his 2nd grade teacher at Presidio Hill School was the person who really encouraged him and got him very excited about birds. So we went to Cathedral, and it was just a disaster. You know, you realize how, you know, kids are very resilient, and, you know, Logan would have done okay at Cathedral. I mean, this is a kid that got straight A's except the B in PE. It's like, how the hell do you get a B in PE? I mean, come on, really?
He was distracted and looking at birds.
His binoculars looking up at the birds instead of, you know, kicking the ball. And there were and, you know, Cathedral is not a bad school. It's a very good and prestigious school, and, you know, for the right kid, it is great. And there's some things that they did that I really love. They understood that they had all these boys, and so every morning the boys would run around Nob Hill, you know, and it's like, that's a good idea. Get them tired out, and then they'll be able to sit down and focus. Actually, this is just kind of a funny sideline, which you can cut from the interview.
All right.
I remember.
I can pause.
Cathedral was not a good match for Logan, And so we looked into taking him out of school, and we went to an annual meeting of the Homeschoolers of California.
Okay.
I think it's called Homeschoolers of California. And they have an annual meeting in Sacramento every August. And,
Okay, coming up.
and it was really interesting because it was a very broad group of homeschoolers. Everyone from the Jeffersonians, who believe you don't really start until 4th grade and then you teach reading, writing, and arithmetic and contracts, to the unschoolers, who basically feel that you don't need any curriculum. You just live life and you learn through, you learn math through making pound bread or pound cake, or you learn physics by observing birds, or you learn, the unschoolers are a really interesting group. It's not my cup of tea, but it is a big part of the schooling community. And then there are, of course, the religious schoolers, and then there are all sorts of platforms that companies have made to make schooling available, especially kind of this sort of schooling, remote schooling, and with, varying successes. And we were inspired. Well, we were very happy to go to this and actually find out that there were a lot of resources for homeschoolers. And there are a lot of people that get together in groups. There were, at the time, Yahoo groups was really big. And so there were lots of Yahoo groups that, Bay Area homeschoolers, San Francisco homeschoolers, and, with the ways to socialize your kids. And of course, one of the things that was interesting about moving Logan to Cathedral was that, and then moving him away from Cathedral into kind of uncharted territory, was that the first question, and oftentimes the only question, but the number one question people said is like, what about socialization? And it was so interesting. It's like, okay, let me just get this straight. You're worried about my 12-year-old son, and you think that it's a good thing for him to be in a room with 25 other 12-year-old sons? Boys? I don't know. That's not kind of socialization. I mean, I see Lord of the Flies. It's like and Logan, he was a fencer, so he had his fencing buddies. He was a birder, so he had friends that were in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. Right. I mean, he's a very, all the way up to their 90s. He's very comfortable with all manner of people. And of course, socialization is different for different kids too. It doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody wants to be as self-directed or as individually directed as homeschoolers, homeschool children. But with Logan, it worked well. And one of the problems we ended up with Cathedral, and one of the reasons we left, was that Logan was kind of a rising star in the world of ornithology. And he was being asked to participate in all sorts of events that would take him away from school. And, we asked for the first couple of times. It's like, well, we'd like to, get an excuse to do this. Oh, well, no. It's like, no. It's like, no. It's like, okay, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. Okay, so the next time you just lie. It's like, oh yeah, oh, he's sick, and he's up, birding with Rich Stallcup, who actually, spearheaded the Point Reyes National Shoreline Initiative, looking at birds with Rick. I mean, and I felt like I was just fighting the school at every juncture to support my, granted, a little peculiar, unusual child that I felt would do so much better with a little bit more latitude. And so we just went off the deep end. We spent the summer away from the States that summer, and talked to Logan about it. And he said, yep, I want to do it. And I did actually have, Katie, you had asked earlier about my experience with teaching the kids. But other than that Amsterdam experience, I did have one other experience. So Logan wanted to go to Cornell. Even back then, he's wanted to go to Cornell since he was 8, and because of their lab of ornithology. And so one of the things that we decided to do was we bought the textbook from Cornell, Ornithology 101. And my idea was that we would go through and start, reading it, and it didn't work. I mean, I didn't have the expertise or the time. It was frustrating. It was frustrating to him. And, we have gone to the homeschooling event, but it's getting late. It's like October. and my kid is like not doing, he's not in school. And so we were inspired by a couple of people who had started homeschooling their kids on the East Coast. And what they had done was they hired teachers to school their kids. And so Brewster and I continued on this model. We called it custom schooling. Mm-hmm. And based on what we had learned in Amsterdam, I felt it was important for us to be able to find teachers who are really passionate about whatever it was that they were going to teach. By the time you're in 6th grade, you're doing subjects, so you have to, figure out how to teach all of these different subjects. So why not find a young math PhD candidate from Berkeley and have them teach your kid math? In fact, and that was exactly what we did. We had a young man who was just, of all the teachers, he was the only teacher that we had for the entire 5 years. And he was really an older brother to Logan. He was a math PhD student, and he was teaching at San Francisco State as well. And he had, pointy black leather shoes, and he rode a motorcycle, and he had kind of a disheveled, wool, beautifully cut and manufactured wool coat that he must have gotten at Goodwill, because it kind of rumpled and not. But he was just and cool glasses, and he sang in a rock and roll band, and he was just like this really cool mentor for Logan, who was.
Did I not meet him?
And you probably did.
I might have. And why don't I still know him? He sounds cool.
Yes, no, he was a really lovely young man, and we ended up teaching these classes at the Internet Archive, my husband's work, because it was more of a academic setting. So the teachers would all go to the archive. So in selecting teachers, so it's October, and I'm not really, I'm not with the program yet. I'm getting a little nervous because I've taken my kid out of school, and I feel like I'm kind of falling down on the job. So I based on the model of these 2 friends of ours on the East Coast, I wrote a couple of Craigslist advertisements for teachers. And it's important that we were not. It wasn't tutoring. It was teaching. It was a different sort of model, because of course, and I have no problem with tutors getting $150 an hour or whatever they charge, but that I'm not going to pay $150 an hour for a teacher to teach basic math. But I wrote these ads, and in fact, one of them was a poem to the letter F, and it was, talking about, we're from San Francisco, and we love fog and fries and all of these things, and it was just a very humorous poem, and at the end, if this sounds like something you might be interested in, send your resume to such and such a mailbox. And I had 120 responses. And it was a little overwhelming, because it was like, whoa. And, through a lot, and to be fair, there were a couple of responses in there where people had written back and said, okay, I'm not interested in teaching, but you sound really cool. Or I'm not interested in teaching, but wow, I wish I was, because this ad really made my day. Or,
Oh, nice.
it was really kind of fun. But after a bit of a process, we weeded it down to 5 people. And this was for the English position. And one of the people that was in that 5, I mean, any of them would have been fabulous. I think we couldn't have gone wrong with any of them. But one of the teachers had just been let go from Cathedral School for Boys, teaching 7th and 8th grade English. It's like, perfect. It's like, so I knew that he was going to get the curriculum that I would have been paying for anyway. He had that teacher for 2 years. But when you have a one-on-one situation, there are all sorts of amazing things that you can do. They went down, they were reading Steinbeck, and they were talking about migrant workers. And so they went down to Salinas Valley and they talked to migrant workers. They interviewed them, and then they did a paper on it. They went and they sat down on Cannery Row in Monterey and wrote poetry. I mean, they went up to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland and spent a week doing plays and talking about it. Just, you could do such interesting things. So that was a huge success story too. And then after Suzanne, who worked with us for 2 or 3 years, I can't remember, we went through a couple of other English teachers. We found a lovely woman to teach him Chinese. She responded to the ad, and she sounded really interesting. She was from mainland China. Her mother was a Chinese opera singer, and she really took a real interest in Logan and his education. She had him over for dinner a couple of times with her husband, and I'm still in touch with her. She's a really lovely young woman. And so after a couple of years of Chinese, he had started Chinese at Cathedral, but after a couple more years of Chinese, Ling Ming, the teacher, actually started getting other people to teach for her. So she kind of started a little business out of this, out of getting teachers to teach. And at one point, Logan had a TV, I think it was like a TV soap opera personality who was teaching him. So that was kind of fun too.
Mary?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the time and don't want to keep, so there's a couple specific questions, and I think we can answer them from what you've told us, but just very specifically, in his education, was there anything that concerned you, or did you feel that its social, cultural value needed more attention?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I was just going to get to, so we've gone through math and English and Chinese, and it's like, what else is missing? Science. It's like, how do you use science at home? We had our little chemistry experiments, but that was really nothing compared to a high school curriculum of science. We were actually very lucky. Logan early on started taking classes at San Francisco State as a non-matriculating student. And we did have a couple of people come and teach science, and it's hard to teach science at that level without a lab. And we have, microscopes and all sorts of equipment around here, but we didn't feel, it took us a while to kind of feel that we got our grounding with science. But once we had the opportunity to use San Francisco State for our science curriculum, I felt set. In fact, Logan took, I can't remember, it was one of the classes he was taking, and maybe it was biology. So he's at Cornell finally. He ends up getting into Cornell a year early, and is taking classes, and they say, oh wow, you're taking biology did you take biology at San Francisco State too? He said, yeah. It's like, well, what's it like? It's like, is it like a lot better at Cornell? He said, well, it's actually it's kind of the same. It's like, it's the same. Maybe you should be back here in California. He said, well, yeah, but the students are a lot smarter here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it was, also, I feel like the whole homeschooling discovery process was kind of a lifting of veil after veil after veil. And, the fact that, most kids don't have to be on a strict schedule. In fact, it's maybe not to their best advantage. I'm a huge proponent of gap years. I think that, giving kids real life experience so that when they are sitting down to learn, they're learning about something they want to learn about.
Yeah.
And that they are able to then more fully engage in it. But yeah, the science curriculum was something that really concerned me, because I felt like it took me a while to figure out how to make that work for us as a family.
I'm just thinking the English teacher might have used film in his curriculum. How was film, or was film? I know you all love films and you have them at home, but were films used in any of the curriculum?
They weren't actually. Unfortunately, they might have been both of my kids did a lot of film studies in college, because we do watch a lot of films at home. The English curriculum was general for the first couple of years, and then we hired a young woman from Dartmouth who did American literature, and then we hired another San Francisco Unified School District teacher to teach modern American literature, and somebody else to teach European literature. And so it was all very specific and based on whatever the teachers were good at. And fortunately, with homeschooling, at least in California, it's very straightforward to actually homeschool. You have to file an affidavit with the Secretary of State in Sacramento saying that you are a school, and you have to, the rules are surprisingly lax. You have to take attendance. That's one of the big things. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not going to be a problem. No, but you have to have records that you took attendance. Like, okay, I can do that. But they were mercifully very accommodating to many different styles. Like I said, from the conference, there were just many different types of homeschooling. And we avoided that question originally because we were still kind of enrolled at Presidio Hill School, so we didn't have to file an affidavit until later.
Very, very interesting. And what about testing? Did you have to show some form of assessment?
Well, there's this interesting guy in Santa Cruz. His name is Wes Beach, and he has West Beach High School, which is basically a tool for a lot of homeschoolers that want a little bit more kind of structure around the schooling. And he taught a class at the homeschooling conference on writing a transcript, basically. And, so the unschoolers have got to get very creative about that, right? Because they have to be able to, if you want your kid to graduate, and you may not, you don't actually need to have a high school diploma. You can sometimes, test into colleges and whatnot. But it does make it a lot easier. And it's actually not that hard if you just write a transcript. So I spent the time with Wes to kind of understand what I was trying to do with the transcript, and it was relatively straightforward. So there was no formal testing. But, oftentimes you can tell a lot about someone's education by just talking to them. It's like you can tell, how many inferences they're bringing in and what their vocabulary is, and how engaged, how interested, how curious they are. And so we found it to be just an amazing opportunity for us to get off the education treadmill. And I don't make any qualms about people that want to be on that treadmill. It is a lot easier. I mean, this is not the easy way out. I mean, unless you're maybe unschooling, and even then, that has its own set of issues. But it's I feel that my younger son received an excellent education, and we kind of the Secretary of State does give you, kind of, you have to check off kind of certain boxes. It's like, okay, science, you need 3 years of science and 4 years of math and 4 years of English and 3 years of language. And, there's a whole, whatever, those are not real numbers, but they're, an approximation. There is a set of, standards that you need to do. But, going to Europe, taking the early example of living in Amsterdam, going to Europe and spending time in museums, you can learn a lot about history.
Sure.
You can learn a lot about perception and about composition and about just all sorts of things. Politics, people, art is all about all of those things. So, and I did ask my older son if he wanted to be homeschooled again, and no, he didn't. And because I felt like we were spending so much effort on Logan's schooling, because even though it was fairly straightforward, I still had to, schedule the teachers, and in general, the teachers were working between 5 and 7 hours a week. It was so it was really a teaching job. It was not a tutoring job. And I think we paid $35, $40 an hour. It could be a little bit more depending on experience. And granted, it's a lot more expensive to do that than going to the public school. But we weren't going to the public school. We were going to private schools, and it was about a third less than going to private schools. And I can't remember what the numbers are now in California, but the California state pays it's about $10,000 a student that they that they put in to invest in each of the students. And and I understand there are classrooms, and there's all sorts of insurance and other things that come into play to have a place for children to be learning. And the public school works for the vast majority of kids. It really does. I mean, it's amazing. I'm a huge fan of public schools. I'm a recipient of the great bounty of public schools where I grew up. And I do believe in public schools, but there are kids on both sides of the spectrum that are not really served by our public school system, nor can they easily be, because frankly, it takes a lot of extra time and effort to help kids with special issues. It takes a lot of time and effort to help kids that are like bored because they're like they did what you're teaching in school 3 years ago. And how do we create an environment where we can serve more kids better? And like I said, getting off of the 8 to 3 treadmill of traditional education was such an eye-opening experience for me, and one that there are lots of people out there that can teach and especially if you're only teaching 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 kids. I mean, my older son actually, until just a couple of days ago, was teaching English in China. So, we've got a teacher in the family, and there's a lot of classroom management. And teachers have to be skilled at how to handle, a large group of children, and what do you do with people that are, kids that are disruptive, and how do you manage, again, these same things that we're talking about, the kids that are not that are not being served by the traditional classroom.
Yeah.
So,
Huh. Uh, well, you know a bit about Screen 360 TV, and you mentioned Aisha, a person you feel who would benefit from Screen 360 TV.
yeah.
Would love to have that information, and happy to. Well, we've got programs on at 9, 10:30, and 5:30 in the afternoon. If this is a 10-year-old, I believe, 10:30 in the morning would probably be the best time
Uh-huh.
them to come
Well,
on.
I will contact Aisha today and see if and give her your contact information. And what address would be the best?
Give it the Stanford one, the CM Kavanaugh at Stanford dot no at alumni.stanford.edu.
Okay,
I think you have that one on.
I think I do.
Yeah.
And I can of course recreate it because I know your name.
Mary and I are reversals. She's Mary Catherine and I'm Catherine Mary.
Oh my goodness.
Let me see here, Miss Mary. How much? I know you. I think the two of you subscribe to movie company, Netflix, for instance. How much would you pay for Screen 360 TV as a household access?
Oh, it's really interesting. I'm not such a good person to ask because I'm not really constrained in terms of how I would get it based on whether I felt it was worth getting
Sure.
or not. So,
Sure.
I mean, we do have Netflix. We also stream a lot on Amazon Prime. We still, believe it or not, periodically buy DVDs because, and we have a DVD player. We spend a lot of time watching things with our kids. I mean, and our kids are now 23 and 25. And right now we're watching the Avatar, The Last Airbender series. Oh my God, so great.
Right, I've never seen that one. Good.
Yeah.
Well, we want to make it really accessible for everyone, and so we're looking at $5.99 a month, and we'll have 3 subscriptions: a household subscription, a teacher subscription, and a filmmaker subscription, which brings into play the necessity for, especially for American filmmakers, to see young audiences watching international film. And this has been one of my real pain points that I to address with Screen 360 TV, is that American filmmakers are not making films to go out into the world, to be seen. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and one of them is that there is no curriculum. And so this is the development of a curriculum, and the first thing we need to do is show the filmmakers that there is a different way to make films, and a different audience to make films for, a different, a worldly thinking audience. So that's
I think one of the things I really love about Screen 360 is just the breadth of and being able to bring different points of view. And I know the films that you've suggested for us over the years too, there's some of the films that have really stuck with us because, Hollywood is fabulous, but Hollywood just keeps retelling the same stories over and over again. and you get a story from India or from Uzbekistan or from, you know, even France, and it has a different cadence, it has a different point of view, it has a different style of storytelling. And I think that's so valuable for kids to experience, especially kids that don't have the chance to travel. I mean, I've been very fortunate in my life, and my kids have gone all over the world. And for me, that was a real priority because I felt it was very important to have kids that were citizens of the world. And but not everybody can do that. And I think that, you know, one of the great gifts of Screen 360 is that you give a window onto the world. And I think that is so important, especially in this day and age.
Yes, yes. And with the pandemic, the two pandemics, the virus and the racial pandemic, there's empathy is sparked for the world. The world is looking in and we are looking out at it. And this is really the opportunity to engage peers in educating each other through sharing responses. This is an opportunity for education to shift and get out of the building, get out of the architecture and get back into a heart and time. I mean, these are the true constructs, I think. So empathy, we're leading with empathy in the films that we are going to program. Dee Dee has the expertise with advanced placement, and we're looking at how that fuses with international baccalaureate. So we will be able to serve the teachers by categorizing films in the way that they need to teach to them, but they'll still be out there accessible to households and the students to choose the way that they want to. And the filmmakers, they can contribute in the way they need to too. So after this last week and digging in with Dee Dee and Jack and having these business gurus reflecting on us, is just very, very useful to pivot Screen 360 TV, specialize it and focus it on high school teachers and their needs right now for next fall.
Right.
And that's the big deal. That's a big deal.
Dee Dee, I didn't realize that you had expertise in the AP testing too. And Katie, you had asked about testing, but of course we did AP testing and also for Chinese, the HSK. So that I, when you had asked about testing, I was thinking of, ongoing testing, not the big kind of placement test. But
placement test,
we did do those. So.
Wow. So eye-opening, Miss Mary. I mean, I knew it going along, but the intricacies were lovely. I mean, and I know Logan now and Caslon, and the two of them, I mean, the two brothers are lovely together. And that's the link. I don't see an intellectual difference, that they're both pursuing what they love.
Right.
And Logan is an ornithologist, and he knows what he wants to learn, and gets along very, very well with people, considering the stories he tells. Dee Dee, a very special part of these Mary and Brewster's home and their upbringing, the boys' upbringing, is that every Thursday night there's a dinner with friends and new friends. And that's for 30 years. Thursday night for 30 years. and so this is an incredible education in bringing people. I mean, if every person is a story, and a film in a way, every person that they met at a dinner table,
wow, that's fantastic.
made an imprint. So this is valuable, and might be interesting to get Screen 360 TV together with the Harvard Dinner Project.
Oh, good idea.
Okay, good, good. Okay, our Harvard Family Dinner Project, because they're probably helps supporting with resources as well. Wow, wow, that's good. Dee Dee, did you have any questions for Mary?
Actually, I think I was about to ask a couple of questions, but you already asked them.
Oh, I did. Okay. Okay, okay.
Okay, that was really good though. Very good.
And we might, is Logan at home? We might circle back and interview him.
He is heading out on another ornithological adventure tomorrow.
Okay. Where's he headed?
I believe he's headed down south. Let me see if he's here.
Dee Dee, how's your time? Jack said he.
Yeah.
Logan will come down for just a second.
Oh, super. Yeah, that would be great.
Logan, you want to just pull up this chair? This is Miss Katie, and we're on a conference call, and we're talking about homeschooling.
Oh, okay.
So she has some questions for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Hi, Logan. And this is Dee Dee Pierce,
Hi.
my colleague on Screen 360 TV. And she is a former award-winning high school teacher. And you might want to speak specifically to the AP, Dee Dee.
Well, no, I think with the AP and homeschooling, what I found was really fascinating recently when I started looking into homeschooling was how successful kids are on an AP test. I was blown away because it's such a rigorous, curriculum, for a teacher to teach that curriculum. It's like, it's fast paced and intense, etc. And somehow I don't think we think of homeschool as the same rigor, right? The same rigor. So I guess my question is, how were you able to teach the course at home or be taught and prepare for that test?
Good question.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, well, I didn't actually take any AP specifically, but for a lot of other tests, HSK for Mandarin and some others, it was one-on-one learning. So it was, a lot of the teachers we hired were, taught that kind of content previously in larger class settings. It was just more tailored to me specifically. It was just more individualized. So as you were mentioning, it's a fast-paced course and whatnot, but as long as there's only one person, you can just kind of go with the pace of the kid, whether that's faster or slower than what they'd be used to teaching.
Well, I think it's exactly what you just confirmed what you said earlier, and that was the fact that, you can get it. It doesn't have to be, an hour a day, 5 days a week. It can happen in a different setting, different parameters, and you can get it covered. You can definitely get it covered, and especially if you don't have all the other distractions or interruption and all those things. But that's very impressive. Really, really impressive. So
I have another question for Logan.
Anyway, there's also, in the homeschooling community, I know that there are, in fact, I thought he had taken a couple of the AP classes, but there were teachers that we interviewed that were specifically had taught AP, American history, or AP, calculus BC or something like that, and yeah, it is a very rigorous curriculum, and so. But as Logan said, the advantage of the one-on-one is so powerful that you can get through material so much more efficiently. And you don't have to, and this is kind of the magic of homeschooling in general, is you never have to worry about being left behind, because you're not going to be left behind. And you never have to worry about being bored, because if you want to go faster, you just go faster. And so it really, that tailored environment is so powerful.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead, Dee Dee.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think what's really interesting right now with this pandemic and all of the, at home teaching, the offline, what do you call it? At home learning, right? Right now is that some kids are like liking it because they can take care of the work themselves, and it's not like they've got school all day and then athletics immediately afterwards and then a ton of homework, to get done before the next day. And it's like, they're kind of like, oh, this is kind of more relaxing. I can do it at my own pace. I can get it done and I can get more rest. I can go do this and that. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of liberating. And I think that's one of the interesting pieces is kids are going like, this is much better than being at school every day from 8 to 3 or 4, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
It is exhausting. That kind of a schedule is exhausting. And kids are growing, and all that. So yeah.
Well, and I think that was a big difference between a lot of the traditional schooling systems and mine was it wasn't that I wasn't in class or working any less, it was that it was spaced out. So it wasn't I was going to class at 8 a.m., getting off at 3, and then, as you said, you have the extracurriculars right after. I would often be busy from early in the morning, 7 or 8, until, whenever, sport, I would fence, and that would often go till 8 or 9, or if I didn't, then I'd get off at 6 or something. But I just have little hour chunks and stuff in between, often that I would use for commuting or just spending time doing other stuff or studying or whatnot. And just I really liked, as you were saying, the kind of the freedom that was associated with that. You could spend the time how you wanted it.
Right.
As opposed to just always at a single location at school in this very specific mindset.
Was there something, Logan, that you wished you had now that you've had a little hindsight?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I honestly don't think about it too much. Not that immediately jumps to mind. Like, honestly, I had a lot. I liked my high school schedule a lot more than I liked my college schedule, which for a lot of people, that's kind of like college.
The opposite.
College is the change of pace where you can kind of make your own schedule, and I was used to that already. But yeah, no individual thing like jumps immediately to mind. But I will say that the freedom of being able to create your own schedule and have that malleability where you can kind of tailor around what you want was really, really great for my learning.
Great. I wonder about the community, the homeschool community. Was there a homeschool community that had a high school prom or something like this?
So yeah, I mean, there was a homeschool community. I wasn't really part of it though. That wasn't my community. I did go to prom with my girlfriend at the time, who went to one of the schools in San Francisco.
But she was going to that school.
But she was going,
so she was enrolled in
right. So a lot of my social outlets from people my age were through just random internships and volunteer things and stuff like that. And then, but a lot of my friends were not people my age. They were people in the Burning community and other communities that were older, that were 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
And and so that was that. Like I had just as many people in different times of their lives as I did my age. So for someone who is very focused on having a huge group of friends that's 16, it might not work as well. But if you do kind of have the community thing figured out through other means, because my school communities were never my biggest communities through life. Like I graduating college, I'm one of the only people I know that, I mean, there's like 4 people back at college. I mean, they've all graduated now, but there's 4 people from college that aren't in California that I'm like kind of interested in keeping touch on. But mostly my friends stayed here. I was more socially connected moving back here than I ever was in college. Which again, that describes a different kind of social system than a lot of kids in the 14 to 17 age range have. But if you do kind of have your social needs met in other ways, then it's a really great system.
And maybe the school structure is actually kind of maybe a false, or it's an inflicted structure on a child. Yeah, that's really interesting. Great to hear you say that.
It's
Logan.
factory model.
Yeah, and this is what we
Yep.
have the opportunity to change now.
No, well, I think there is. I mean, and I saw this again more in college than I ever had in high school.
Do you want to talk a little bit? I know that we're kind of past your time, but one of the things that was kind of interesting when we were trying to get other people interested in this homeschooling model, and especially Eric, who was Logan's math teacher that I mentioned, he was teaching a couple other kids at the Internet Archive, and you had the opportunity to actually teach math to like Amelia, right? And to some of the other kids a little bit. Anyway, I just thought that was, another way that Brewster was quite interested in the idea of, using resources in new ways. That if you had tiny schools instead of these large, as you said, manufacturing-based schools, what could you do that's different? You could go have classroom time at the California Academy of Sciences. You could go and be in Golden Gate Park and do experiments down in Crissy Field by, dipping, nets into the water and looking in a microscope at what comes up. There are all sorts of new things. And Didi, you may find this interesting. When we were doing Thursday night, we've been doing Thursday night dinner, as Katie said, for over 30 years. One night, I happened to recognize that I knew the birthdays of like over half the people at the table. And I said, okay, we're just going to do a quick survey. What year were you born? 1960, 1960, 1959, 1960, 1961, 1960, 1960, 1958. And it was just like, there were 15 people and we were all born within 1 or 2 years of each other. It's like, wow, that is a remnant of our education.
Yes.
The people that are really exactly your age. Like everybody, the vast majority of people I know were born in 1960.
Sure.
I mean, how weird is that?
But listen to this, Miss Mary. We are looking at that now. Peers, and we call them international peers, because now children born into the world have a greater opportunity to learn from each other and influence each other now more than ever before. So it might have happened anyway, besides schooling, that you connected, because the first order of organization is birth into time.
Yeah. Well, and harkening back to what you were saying earlier, Miss Katie, about how that kind of age limitation is inflicted in a lot of school settings. I mean, I never really saw this in high school because my high school was so atypical. But in college, I really saw that there was this divide, this gap, not only in well, first off, within certainly within undergraduates to graduates to professors, you wouldn't be friends with a professor. You wouldn't be friends with a graduate student, which these are people your age. These are people, 6 years older than you. They're in the same education system as you are. And even inside undergrads, most of the time, juniors and seniors would not be friends with freshmen or sophomore. There's really rigid definitions, and it is kind of just cultural. It's not anything that's based on anything else. But that doesn't mean it's not a reality. There is this distance and this kind of, this weird stigma about not moving outside of your little social clique.
Well, that's interesting because, like you said, for many kids, college is the big mind expanding thing, and for Logan, it was actually a contraction for exactly this sort of thing. It's like, wow, I'm not sure I like that.
Well, it's maybe more placement into the workforce. And so, as Dee Dee said, it's a factory and it's churning out laborers into the workforce at a,
Exactly. What a shame.
Time by time.
Shame.
Yeah.
An increment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. I'll send you the recording on this. I think we should go debrief with Jack. We've going into the weekend. We are very excitedly talking with a gent who, Russell Miller, who has been doing a very similar thing to Screen 360 TV, but we'll take the younger grade. So from 3rd grade to 7th grade, and we'll handle 7th grade to 12th grade. And Russell is in New York, has already worked for Nickelodeon and Noggin, and teaches in New York. And I think we're going to have a great school alternative going on between the two of us. So,
Great.
yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Very exciting.
very exciting news. So next week at Thursday night dinner, we'll have more news.
Love it. I love it.
Okay. Thanks very much for all of your insights, and we'll keep you apprised.
Thank you. Nice talking to you guys. Thank you.
It was nice to meet you, Dee Dee.
You too.
Bye-bye.